Hello, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro, and welcome to The Learning Curve. We appreciate you guys following with us again this week. Today I have a very special guest. I've got my beautiful wife, Melissa Shapiro.
Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. You know, Dr. Anderson usually fills this seat, and he's kind of left some big shoes to fill while he's away this week, but I'm hoping maybe I can offer some interesting perspectives to the viewers. I don't have a chiropractic background. I'm not a doctor of chiropractic, but I am someone who's kind of come into this lifestyle and embraced it, and I'm hoping maybe I can offer, again, a little bit of a different perspective to folks who are watching.
Great, that sounds perfect. What we want to cover today is we actually want to cover just some different topics. One of the first things I want to start with is I just want to give you some insight into our family. You know, one of the reasons I've got my wife with us today is I want to let some of you guys know what you can do as a family to increase your health. And so to start, I'd first like to ask you if you could kind of give us an idea of what your life was like before you were introduced to some of these things.
Right. You know, I'm someone who grew up with no knowledge of chiropractic. I knew about them, knew that, you know, they were really good with things like accidents, car wrecks, whiplash, low back pain, things of that nature, but I never knew anything about the whole wellness aspect of chiropractic as just a different approach to healthcare in general. And I made my first trip to the chiropractor at the age of 21. I had been in a four-wheeler accident when I was 17 and had hurt my back and my shoulder in that accident, and you know, tried managing the pain with medication, even went through some physical therapy, and both of those would always help in the short term, but never offered any long-term relief. And so finally, after several years of this, I decided I would go ahead and try a chiropractor. There was an office right down the road from me, and you know, figured, what the heck, I'm just gonna see what he can do for me. So went in, I had the x-rays done. He found some trauma in my low back, some subluxations or misalignments in my spine that he thought were causing the pain I was having, and also some issues up in my neck that he thought might be associated with the shoulder pain that I was dealing with. And so I became a patient. I was going 3 times a week for about a month, and slowly, you know, the pain really started to go away. But like a lot of people, once I started feeling better, I stopped going.
Sure.
I figured the problem had been fixed, but lo and behold, as time went on, the pain did come back. And even a couple years after I had first started my chiropractic treatment in my early 20s, I also started developing migraine headaches. Never made the connection that that might be something a chiropractor could help me with. So fast forward a few years, and you and I meet and start dating, and you know, he was in chiropractic school at the time and began adjusting me. And through that process, my migraines were gone. Haven't had one since. And so that really made, you know, a believer out of me as to some of the things that chiropractic could offer besides just low back and neck pain, things like that. And then we have our son, Jackson. He's 2.5 years old. And I tell you what, after seeing the lifestyle that he has led under chiropractic care and this whole just approach to wellness and health, it's amazing. He is smart, he's healthy, his eyes are bright, his skin glows, his vocabulary is amazing for the age that he is at. You know, I've been around so many kids his age that are constantly sick. They're fighting the ear infections, things like that. He's never had an ear infection. He's never had a respiratory infection, no coughs. He's never had the allergies, things like that. He's maybe had 2 fevers in his 2.5 years. He's never needed an antibiotic. He's never been on children's Tylenol, no Motrin. And it's not because we've deprived him of these things. He just hasn't needed them.
Sure.
And it's because of, I think, the way that we've approached his health care.
That's a lot of great points. You know, I just want to touch on some of the things that you talked about. You know, you mentioned regular checkups with the, you know, with subluxations in mind, keeping the spine healthy. And these are great things, as, you know, Melissa kind of goes through a list of how great her health is improved and how great Jackson's health has been, and, you know, how great my health has been. Now that you guys have a picture of what your health can look like, I want to give you an idea of some of the things that play a role in this. First and foremost, the regular checkups of the spine. For those of you guys that don't know, she mentioned a word, subluxation. What that amounts to is the way the spine works and the way the nervous system works is you've got signals that start up here at the brain, travel down the spinal cord, and then come out of all these nerves that go into every muscle, organ, gland, everything in the body. And so when you've got misalignments in the spine, it interferes with whatever end destination those nerves have. And so it's really important to keep the body checked and keep the nervous system healthy. Another thing that's been a big role is the nutrition. The nutrition is huge. We really try to stay on top of the food that we're taking in, the amount of water, those types of things, as well as, keeping Jackson checked and keeping all of us checked for nutritional deficiencies. That's a big part of it.
It is. And one, tidbit to mention, Jackson got his first adjustment when he was about 20 minutes old in the hospital, in the delivery room. Because you think about it, the birthing process, it's hard on a baby. The neck gets twisted, the body gets crunched. And we had the most easy textbook delivery, but we still wanted to make sure that he was starting out with a aligned spine and not going into life potentially facing these problems. And think of some of the deliveries that moms and babies have been through. There's forceps, there's a vacuum, think about what could happen to that baby's neck. And it may seem strange to be thinking, oh my gosh, you adjusted a newborn baby, but you probably have a different idea in your mind of what that entails. It literally was maybe like a little bit of thumb pressure. It's not the same kind of adjustment that an adult gets. So it's incredibly gentle with kids, and he's been getting regular adjustments since that very first one at 20 minutes old.
Sure, and as she mentioned, I don't jump off the top rope when it comes to adjusting little kids. It's very light thumb pressure. One thing about adjustments in general is you're always kind of keeping in mind who you're dealing with. Right. I'm going to adjust a kid his age differently than I am an adult. I'm going to adjust somebody that's in their 70s, 80s, and 90s differently than I would somebody our age. So it's very different, and it's very fluid based on who you're dealing with. And last but not least, I just want to talk about, I know we touched on diet a little bit, but that's been a huge part. We've really focused on what we take in as a family. But also we take in some different things depending on our individual needs and our individual food allergies. We
do, for sure. One of the things we do, we are dairy-free. And a lot of parents are so surprised by that. When you have a baby, don't they have to have milk? Well, no, they don't. For a lot of kids and adults in general, dairy is not necessarily a good thing for them. They can have reactions to it that can cause a lot of mucus production. Some of the runny noses that kids, always have at that young age. When parents take them off that milk, it clears up so quickly. And we, for example, Jackson has been on almond milk, and it has just as much calcium, if not more, than regular milk does. So it's not an issue of the child is not getting the calcium they need. We're also a gluten-free household. You and Jackson both have a little bit of sensitivity to gluten, digestive issues if you take it in. And so that's another lifestyle change we've made. And it's so intimidating to think, oh, I can never eat bread again. I can never have cookies and cakes. You can. Sometimes it's just a different tweak of your recipe. We're not starving. We still eat good food, but it is a big lifestyle adjustment. But to us, the end result has been so worth it.
Oh, there's no question, and that's something we're going to touch on with some of these later segments. We're going to touch on how to take some of these concepts and make them a little bit more of a reality, make them user-friendly, and allow them to be things that people can implement into their lives and into their families.
Yes, it can be very intimidating, but I promise you, I've been there. I was scared in the beginning, but it can be done, and we'll give you some tips to help you along.
Yep, and that sounds great. Once again, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro with Ultimate Health Chiropractic. And on our next segment, we're going to touch on kids. Hi, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro with Ultimate Health Chiropractic. Appreciate you guys keeping with us. We are going to get into some new information with this next segment. We want to touch on kids and some of the things that can impact maybe your kids and their health. And so once again with me I've got Melissa Shapiro, my beautiful wife, and I just brought her along because we've got a son, Jackson, and she's got some great insights into some of the things that we've done as a family to maintain Jackson's health. Yeah. So with that, can you just kind of give some people some ideas of some of the things we think about with Jackson?
Yeah, and just to tell you, you know, I'm a mom, just like so many of the moms that are out there probably watching, and some of the moms who are patients at the clinic. You just instinctively want what's best for your child. And sometimes the information that we get from TV, radio, well-meaning people may not always be the best. And so you've got to kind of go with that mom instinct. We all have it. It's very loud. And a lot of times we tend to push it into the back of our head because, you know, oh, someone might think I'm doing something different and that won't be good. But you got to listen to it. And it's okay if you do things different. If you think it's what's best for you and your family, do it and don't question it. With Jackson, we've just really tried to provide him with as much of a non-toxic environment as possible. Because it seems like these days, think of all of the toxic things that kids can be exposed to on a daily basis. You know, some of the food products that they eat have chemicals in them if it's not organic, you know. Milk can have growth hormones in it, things like that. Think about cleaning products in the household, not to mention, you know, if you have a child who's in particular battling things like ear infections, respiratory infections, the constant rounds of antibiotics, they're being given a tremendous amount of vaccines nowadays at a very, very young age. That's a lot for their itty-bitty immune systems to try to fight. It's almost like a toxic overload that they're having to fight against. And so a lot of what we've tried to do is just X out as many of those factors as we possibly could. And we've noticed a tremendous difference in him versus maybe some of the other kids his age who have not had that approach to the non-toxic environment. Again, he's still at 2.5 years old, 100% drug-free. Never had a single drug his entire little life. We try and eat organic food as much as possible. We have our own garden that we try and grow our own food because that helps as well. Cleaning products, laundry detergents. You know, we don't use fabric softener. Just little things like that to try and reduce that chemical load that, you know, kids and even us as adults can be exposed to.
Sure, and you know, one of the things you mentioned is just the toxicity levels and eliminating those. It's really important for people to understand that the air is not as clean as it used to be, the water's not as clean as it used to be, the food's not as clean as it used to be. You know, I can just go on and on and on. And with this, your body is bombarded with toxins, and especially when you've got a kid that's 2.5 years old, his immune system's just developing, to have that kind of a attack is intense. And, you know, so it's important for parents to understand that. And we also want to let parents know that this is not something that, you know, our son Jackson has exclusive rights to. It's not something that's only available to him or that he got lucky or any of those types of things, because those may be some of the things that some of our viewers are thinking is you guys just lucked out. You've only got one child and he just is healthy by luck. Where we've got a lot of friends through the chiropractic community that take care of their kids in a very similar fashion that we do, and they see similar results.
Yeah, he's not the exception to the rule. They have kids who also have never had the antibiotics, and they're, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, not just 2 years old, but they just don't need them. And, you know, another maybe different aspect of our approach to health that might be worth mentioning is when it comes to things like a fever. You know, I think for a lot of parents, you get that fever started in your child and you see that temperature going up, and that can be a very scary thing. But what is a fever made to do?
Well, it's made to raise up your immune system, raise up your metabolism so your body can fight off whatever's attacking it, whether it be an infection or whatever the case may be. And that's a great point in the sense that there are clinics out there that they'll post things, you know, on their boards. They may say something like, is diarrhea good or bad? Is a fever good or bad? And, you know, at first glance, people are like, whoa, what in the world are we talking about? But when you understand things from a different perspective, you realize that your body's raising its temperature for a reason. You realize that the body's having diarrhea for a reason. It's to get the junk out of there. And so it's a learning curve, and that's a great reason of why we call the show what it's called, because this stuff is a learning curve. It's a new perspective on health compared to what most people think.
And just using Jackson as an example, he's had 2 fevers in the 2.5 years he's been with us, and we took that approach. Hey, something's going on in his body that it does not like, and it's trying to fight it off. So instead of immediately trying to suppress that with some, acetaminophen or children's Tylenol, we let it run its course. And I tell you what, the kid rebounded very, very quickly. I think the first fever maybe lasted about 12 hours. And you know what he did the whole time? He slept.
Yep.
I think that's something we as adults have not allowed our bodies to do, is to fix themselves when there's a problem. We get a fever, we take something, we push on through our day, we go to work, we go to the store, and we don't rest and give our body the relaxation it needs to heal itself.
Sure.
Jackson slept for about 20 out of 24 hours, but you know what? He was great afterwards. Second fever, maybe it lasted a little bit longer, and it got a little higher too. It was up to about 103, and that, again, it can be a little scary. And to mention, once you get a fever up around 104, 105, that's a whole different ball game. That could potentially be something serious, and you do want to deal with that. But below that, again, he just had a bug of some sort that his body didn't like. He rested again. We monitored the temperature, kept him cool, gave him, cool compresses and stuff, and within a couple hours, he was fine.
And you mentioned his body had a bug. His body knew what to do. That's a really important concept for people to understand. A lot of chiropractic philosophy is understanding that your body does know what to do. You weren't born with an aspirin deficiency. You weren't born without enough chemicals in your body. And so the vast majority of the time, if you'll just facilitate your body through this process, because one thing I want to mention is when he did have those fevers, I was adjusting him. So I basically had the mindset of, okay, your body definitely knows what to do. It's raising its temperature, raising its metabolism to fight off these things. But let's facilitate a little bit. Let's eliminate any more interference that might be there within the nervous system by correcting the spine and, again, allowing your body to do what it was born to do. Your body is a self-healing organism, and that's a really important concept for people to understand.
It is. I love to use the analogy, what happens when you get a cut on your thumb? It bleeds, and then the scab forms, and it heals itself. Your body knows what to do if you just let it do it. Don't hinder it. Don't try to suppress those natural functions that it may be doing in order to help heal itself.
And that's a great analogy in the sense, too, that the best surgeon in the world, if you have a wound, all he can do is pull those tissues back together. He cannot cause those tissues to heal and to rejoin and to develop scar tissue and to clot and all those types of things. That's all just the body's ability.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing organism, and the things that it can do when it's allowed to are pretty impressive, to say the least.
Sure. One thing I want to touch on, too, real quick is Jackson had a real small spell of eczema. For you guys that don't know, eczema is a skin disorder where, you've just got some itchiness, some irritation, as well as he had some pink eye. And a lot of times pink eye is an issue of, some irritation in the eye, obviously. But one of the things that we used for both of those is I checked him for deficiencies. With his magnesium, it ended up being an issue of not enough, or for his eczema rather, it ended up being not enough magnesium in his system. And then for pink eye, we used something called a homeopathic, which a homeopathic is just a really diluted variation of whatever substance. In his case, it was
poison ivy.
Poison ivy. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It gave him a real small dose of poison ivy, which might sound insane to you people that don't understand these things. But we gave him a super, super, super diluted version of poison ivy, activated his immune system, and his body was able to take care of the pink eye on its own.
It went away overnight, which anybody who's battled it before, the average cure time for treating it with an antibiotic is 48 hours.
Sure.
It cleared up like that.
Yeah, it was almost immediate.
Yeah, and this goes to show you, it's not that he never gets sick. We deal with the same stuff that most parents do. It's just, it's far less often, and it's just a different approach to dealing with it.
Sure. But with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Again, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro with Ultimate Health Chiropractic. And on our next segment, stay tuned because we're going to be talking about food. Hi, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro with Ultimate Health Chiropractic. Thank you again for joining us on our third segment. We're going to be here talking about food.
I'm sure they're enjoying it too.
Exactly. There you go.
We're having some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is my beautiful wife again, Melissa Shapiro. Brought her with me to talk about some of these things. She's been with us through the first two segments, and again with food. This is something that Melissa knows a lot about. When I first came to Melissa about some of the dietary changes that I wanted to make, it was World War III in the Shapiro household.
I'll tell you exactly what I said too. He came one day and had found out that he was a little gluten sensitive and said, honey, I want us to go gluten-free. And I'll tell you what I told him. I said, that's fine. You can cook the meals for yourself for the rest of your life because I'm not doing it. Did I not?
Oh, she was like, how am I going to bake? How am I going to cook? You know, I need all these ingredients to cook properly.
So I thought.
Yeah, and it seems overwhelming. When you've never really given it some real consideration, it seems like, how in the world am I going to have to do this? So we want to kind of touch on how this can become a reality, some of the things you want to look for, and just some of the things you're going to have to do to make this happen. But you mentioned gluten sensitivity. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of tell some people what it means to go on a gluten-free diet? How you can, make this happen for your household?
Sure, and it can be a very intimidating thing in the beginning, that's for sure. I was there just like you probably are. How am I going to completely upend the way that I'm used to eating and completely change everything? I'm never going to be able to eat bread or crackers or things like that ever again, because gluten is a protein in wheat, if I'm not mistaken, and wheat is one of the foods in this country that's grown very cheaply, so it's in a lot of foods because it is such an inexpensive crop. It's in almost everything. I mean, I was so surprised at some of the things that wheat was a main ingredient in that I had never thought of before. Things like, soy sauce and a lot of the, taco seasoning mix, canned soups, almost all have wheat in them. It's in everything. So as I'm learning that, I'm thinking, I don't know what we're gonna cook ever again. But through trial and error, honestly, it's all about just making a few substitutions for some products that are in everything. And then really, if you stick to the meat, the vegetables, and the non-wheat starches like rice, grits, polenta, potatoes, things like that, you're still eating great food and avoiding the gluten. A typical meal in our house on most evenings probably consists of a meat of some sort, most nights a week. We don't eat meat every day. And then I'll do a rice dish or a potato dish to kind of give you a little bit of starch to fill up on. And then we try and do a green veggie of some sort. It's a typical American, weeknight meal, I think, and it's not that hard. You cook very simply. There's not a lot of extravagant ingredients because the more ingredients you start throwing in, the more you might need a product that has wheat in it. And by staying simple, you can avoid all of that. So that's one aspect of our dietary change that we made grudgingly in the beginning, I promise you, but it really does make a difference in the way that you feel afterwards.
Yeah, and it's one of the points you brought up that I want to kind of clarify for people is, as you mentioned, gluten is a protein in wheat, and it's been mass produced, and that's something, or the wheat rather has been mass produced, and that's one of the main problems. And one thing I want people to understand is what happens when you mass produce things like wheat is, it becomes genetically altered to withstand bugs and withstand weather. Bottom line, it becomes something that's borderline synthetic. And so your body does not know how to deal with it. It doesn't know how to process it. And that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to eliminate it from our family, not just myself, is it's toxic for all of us. It's synthetic, so it's even though I really can't tolerate it, I know it's not going to be good for Melissa, and I know it's not going to be good for Jackson, and it's just something that we should eliminate. Statistically, 80% of the population is gluten intolerant. So you may not, these 80%, they may not all break out into hives, or they may not have massive reactions, but what it does do is that at the very least, it causes a low-level autoimmune reaction. What this amounts to is your body recognizes the gluten in the wheat as something that should not be there. As a result, the immune system goes into attack mode, it attacks it, and what it does is the immune system almost gets confused. While it's attacking the wheat and the gluten in the wheat, it's also attacking things like thyroid tissue and some of the other tissues in the body because it thinks that the thyroid tissue is the wheat. And so it just attacks everything, and the end result of that ends up being that your body starts attacking itself, and it destroys valuable tissues like the thyroid.
Yeah.
So we had to get it out of the diet.
We do, and people's reaction a lot of times when they hear this is, well, wait a minute, wheat's been around for such a long time. People have been eating it for, a couple thousand years, but it's not the same wheat that our ancestors were eating. It's changed dramatically, and so has a lot of the food that we consume nowadays. We're not eating the way that humans we're used to for the previous couple thousand years. The diet has changed so dramatically in the past 50 to 100 years. And I think biologically our bodies just don't know how to handle it, especially the Western diet. It's unbelievable. It's full of added fat, added sugar, and added salt, which the combination of that is what's resulted in so many of the epidemic health issues that we're dealing with in our country: diabetes, obesity, heart disease. You go back in other parts of the world into the more traditional cultures and some of what's termed the blue zones, where people live the longest and live the healthiest, they don't eat like we do. But one thing they've noticed is when the Western diet and the fast food chains make their way into these cultures, they get the diabetes, they get the obesity. I was reading a book, it's called The Blue Zones, actually, fantastic book, and they talk about the community of Okinawa in Japan, how they have one of the highest concentrations of centenarians, people who live to 100, in their geographical location. So they have a lot of people who are living to 100 who've been raised and lived their life on that traditional diet, but the upcoming generation is dying off at a tremendously high rate at a young age. They've been exposed to the Western diet, and it's completely altered their health.
Sure. And it's, as you mentioned, it's not, this isn't rocket science. As these super healthy cultures are exposed to some of these things that are not real food, and they have added fat and added sugar and, synthetic components, their health goes way, way down. And so it definitely can change things. As we transition, though, one thing I want you to talk about before we run out of time is I want you to talk about some of the food preparation. Talk about, one of the things I want to do is dispel some of the myths that people have. People feel like I can't cook this way, or it's too expensive. Can you kind of touch on some of those things and how you got around some of those things? Because we were on a budget.
We were on a very strict budget. And the key is cook at home, use simple ingredients, and eat real food. A lot of our diet in this country has revolved around processed foods, prepackaged foods, convenience food, and fast food. If you stay away from those, you're going to save so much money. When you buy an entire meal that's already kind of prepackaged for you, you pay more in the end than you would have if you had bought the individual ingredients and made it yourself. Plus, if you cook just using the simple real food ingredients, butter, potatoes, things that are not packaged that have an ingredient list that you can't even pronounce, you're going to avoid the extra salt and the extra sugar and the preservatives that are in these things to keep them shelf stable. Eat your fruit and veggies. I mean, it's something we know we should do. Grow your own garden if you can. It's so much fun, even if it's just a small garden, to watch something you've planted in the ground grow, and then you put it on your table and eat it. If you don't want to grow it yourself, we are so lucky in this area to have some amazing farmers markets. There's even an online farmers market in Tullahoma and Sewanee. You can order what you want from your computer. Locally grown, humanely raised, grass-fed meats and poultry, organically grown vegetables. Go to the website localharvest.org, and you can look up the farmers markets in our area. Great way to shop. Yes, initially it's going to look like it's more expensive, but once you count in the fact that the produce is fresher, it's more nutritious, you know where it came from, you're not going to have to worry about the foodborne illnesses and stuff that some of the supermarket produce has been struck by lately, and the meat is better for you. These animals are raised humanely on grass, not in feedlots. You're going to get the best bang for your buck, and plus that money stays in your local community. It stays here supporting our farmers in this region.
Absolutely, that's great points. As Will, our producer, is telling us, we need to wrap up. Thank you again for joining us on the Learning Curve. Again, I'm Dr. Brad Shapiro with Ultimate Health Chiropractic. And please join us next week where we will dive into some more exciting things and just uncover some more information. Thanks and have a great day.